All right. I am excited tonight. We are going to be talking to a very wonderful human being. And this is Bob Robert, but I will call you Bob. And he and I met last May at the Hollow Movement, and I immediately liked him for a very good reason. I didn't know that much about him, I'll be honest. But, oh, what a beautiful soul, and I've learned more about him as time has gone by. So, Bob, thank you so much for joining us for Infinite Wisdom, and I can't wait to get into a deep conversation with you.
Thank you. Oh, it's great to be with you and everyone else.
And, we like to do these live because people very rarely as you well know with podcasts, very rarely do they get to ask questions. And so we do it live so that people can do that and they can maybe even give feedback or whatever. And so it's kind of special. And I find that there's dynamism to when we have an audience and how our conversation goes. So anyway, welcome. And Bob, let's go back because one of the things I like to do is kind of figure out the roots of a person, what signals, what signposts there may have been, early in life to bring a person to where they are now. So just give us a little background. Where did you come from? Where did you hail from? Tell us your story.
Yeah, sure. Well, so I grew up as an only child in a neighborhood off Main Street in a small farming community of Eastern Long Island. And actually, there is something pretty interesting about um, my birth that really has to do with where I am now. So we can make connections in a number of ways, and might as well start at the very beginning. So my mother has a really short but very meaningful story to tell about the day that she was in the hospital giving birth to me, and it's what I it's one of those stories that I heard over and over quite a few times, but really didn't know how or what kind of sense to make of it until many years later. But she said, "Parades of celebration filled the streets the day you were born." Of course, not for me, but that was the day that the first atomic bomb was dropped on a world at war.
Oh,
That turned a world at war into a nuclear village. And I didn't realize, I had no idea, even though she had told me that story and what the significance of that was. But long before I knew it, um, uh, it was some. It was I had an inner quest going on very long before I knew what it was, and that was a quest to find peace, my own peace and world peace. And of course, that didn't really become clear to me until probably not until I got to college. But it was the kind of thing I realized then, many years later, that in many ways the timing of our birth and the place of our birth and all those things can have a great significance on our life. And so, jumping ahead, and I'll come back to fill in the details in a minute, but um, that indirectly or maybe directly led me to a career in developmental psychology with a number of side paths along the way, including including mythology, mysticism, philosophy, spirituality. All those things combined to merge into a career of developmental psychology, because I really wanted to see if I could understand and in a more deeper way the significance of that timing and the impact that it had on my own development. Of course, there's a lot of other reasons along with that, but that was one of them. So I was growing up in a small farming town in eastern Long Island as an only child, and I really enjoyed being out in nature. We were in a neighborhood that had a few empty lots around it. That one lot led to a stream that went through the woods, and I spent as much time as I could just wandering along that stream in the woods, uh, learning more from nature at that time than I realized. And again, that came what I did learn and what I was seeking to learn from nature became much clearer to me a couple of decades later when I actually chose to live in a cabin in the woods near the Hudson River. I can talk more about that later. But so I was really um, searching for an understanding of things that I wasn't even aware of at the time.
Your intuitive self was getting you in tune with the natural world, sounds like.
Yeah, yeah. And
And being raised as an only child gave you an opportunity for more quiet, I would think.
definitely did. And interestingly, um, that part of my growing up was very meaningful as well. There probably were some moments when I wondered about why am I, alone? Why don't I have brothers and sisters? But I didn't really dwell on that at all. I really enjoyed being an only child, and I really grew to enjoy the aloneness of it. And I'm sure that had something to do with being drawn to nature and wanting to spend as much time as I could in nature. There was another factor that came into the picture a couple of years later or a few years later after I was born, and this had a big impact on my life too, my early life especially, and continued to have sort of the remains of that experience. Which so I, as an only child, we were in a new nice sort of lower middle class neighborhood, whatever it was then, and and so I had pretty much everything I wanted as an only child, and but there was one thing that I had to find on my own, and that was my voice. I didn't really know, don't really know why, but around the age of 3, I began to stutter, and that increased when I started school, kindergarten, first grade, and I really it was an experience that I really became frustrated by and embarrassed by, and I would do everything possible to avoid having to say some things, answer questions in class or things like that. And I kept to myself probably more than normally as well because of that. But so that was a very early struggle, and I know that everybody has their own. Um, but I mean, during all of that, though, my parents and my teachers were very supportive. They offered compassion and support during that, and I was fortunate that it was one of those things that I guess I just outgrew. But I did end up being silent a lot, and quiet, kept to myself there through all that. But and then there was another interesting timing part to all of that. It was around when I was around 9, that my grandmother came to live with us for part of the year. And I didn't realize it that again at the time either, but my grandmother had a tremendous influence on things. Not only did my stuttering began to let up around that time. Uh, I, I, and even though I continued to carry its effects in various ways, um, it's not about comparing our individual personal challenges, because I know everyone has their own burden and challenge, but my childhood stuttering really created the world that I knew at that time. And it was interesting. But when my grandmother came to live with us, that was a really, I see that now as a turning point in a number of ways. Not only because I sort of outgrew my stuttering about the same time, but I did observe her in her quietness very often. She would be in her room, and she would be reading silently from the Bible in the upper room. And that, her daily practice of devotion, that really didn't know it at the time, had no idea of what kind of impact it was having, but it really nourished my soul as well as hers. And, and that, so her presence in my life at that time was really key. And it was many years later, again, probably in college, when I started majoring in philosophy, that I began to realize the meaning and the significance of these early influences.
Having that demonstration of devotion, daily devotion, quiet daily devotion, that must have been incredibly comforting to somebody who was singular in a way, right? And through your stuttering, and by the way, my husband and my son both struggled with that, so I am familiar with it. But it kept you inner in a way. It kept you maybe in developing this internal sense that, when we're kids and we're just very outward oriented, very, go, go, go. I'm getting a picture of this, this quiet inner space. And you mentioned, well, first of all, I want to ask you, did your parents bring you to any church or any kind of house of worship?
Yeah, yeah. So mm, when we moved to the town that we did, um, they didn't have the particular denomination of Christianity that my grandmother was part of. So so I grew up in the Congregational Church, part of Christianity, and I did the whole thing there. Attended Sunday school before church, and when I got older, I went the whole way through up with all of that all the way through, and then even in Boy Scouts, um, when I was going for all the merit badges and everything, I did get the God and Country Award because of my. I didn't realize the significance, even when I was working on something like, something very specific like the God and Country Award for Boy Scouts. I didn't realize the deeper significance that would have throughout my entire life, because that really was planting the seeds for what later became a conscious, both inner and outer search for just wanting to understand not only the deep meaning of all the world's religions, but what they all had in common. That was my real true interest in pursuing my own ongoing study of comparative religions, was what they all had in common.
Yeah, I'm so with you on that one. That was a driving force for me too. So let's go to your college years. And when did you decide, oh, philosophy is the thing for me?
Well, that's interesting. Um, we lived in a, as I mentioned, we lived in a farming community, and my dad actually, his job was with the state Department of Farm Produce as one of he supervised the Office for Farm Products Inspection, and so he knew all about that, and he knew that that's something that the need for basic food would be something that would never change, and his only subtle advice or direction that he gave to me was it might be a good idea to think about being a grocery store manager. Everybody needs food all the time. And of course that didn't go very far. I didn't think too seriously about that even in high school. But by the time I got to college, I knew that I knew then that it was time for me to uh, not only continue my informal study of comparative religion and everything on my own, but to do that in a more formal way. And so without having any concern about where a major in philosophy would lead me, I knew I had to major in philosophy, and that, of course, did give me the foundation to build on to continue not only a formal study of that, but to continue it in a more meaningful way on my own after college as well.
And I'm sure that must have been an interesting thing to say to your dad. I'm not going to be a grocery store manager, but I'm going to be a philosopher.
Well, I didn't quite use those
Where
words.
it would lead, right?
No.
But I sometimes that can be, a tough conversation.
No.
So, from philosophy, when you graduated, then what were you thinking next?
Well, mm, so at that time, I still didn't, even after I had a degree in philosophy, undergraduate degree, I still didn't know really where that was going to lead me. But I knew that I was interested in books, and so I thought, well, maybe I'll be a librarian. So I actually applied to master's programs in library science, and growing up in Eastern Long Island, I wanted to see the country, and so I applied to um, uh, I think Berkeley and to the University of Washington and maybe another one. I got into the University of Washington for library science, and I drove across the country in a little VW that summer after graduation from college and began my graduate work that summer in Seattle. It only took me about a month to realize that I didn't want to learn to catalog books. I wanted to learn to write books. And so I dropped out of my first graduate program in Seattle, and I drove all the way back home to New York. And I got back home in time enough just to find an announcement about a new program that was starting at one of the State University of New York campuses, a master's program in American folk culture. And that had been another one of my side interests was folklore, folk music. And so I decided, well, maybe that's what I'll pursue, or at least I knew that's going to be my next step. I didn't know if it was going to be my final step, but so I applied the last minute, got in, and spent really wonderful year in Cooperstown, New York, for that program, and just had a great experience there. Not only with the coursework and learning folklore, folk culture, but that was also where I did for my master's thesis. That was where I did my first life story interview. And it happened to be with a Catskill Mountain farmer folk singer who I had met through someone at the school. One of the faculty members knew of him. And so I got in touch with him to ask him if I could work with him on doing and recording his life story. And that turned out to be an amazing experience, my first of its kind. I ended up skipping ahead a few years when I got my first academic job at the University of Southern Maine. One of the first things I wanted to do was to create what became called the Life Story Center, because I wanted to continue my work in doing life story interviews, which I did. and ended up writing a methodology on how to do a life story interview, which is now sort of a classic in its small niche field, and was translated into a couple of languages. But anyway, going back to the year at Cooperstown, that was through the person that I was doing my thesis with during the life story interview with. I met Pete Seeger, they knew each other as well, and so I met Pete Seeger that year, and he happened to mention, because I actually wanted to get in touch with him to see if he had any insights on the life of the man that I was interviewing. But Pete mentioned that he was in the process of raising money to build a replica of a 19th century sloop to sail the Hudson River. I sort of put that in the back of my mind and went on to some other things, which just kind of skipping along to some of those highlights. Then that program in American folk culture didn't directly lead me to my next job, but it was another really very important foundational kind of part of what kind of mixed in with, and really integrated well with my interest in mythology and philosophy and comparative religion in a broad way. And then so I had a year in between where I actually just did substitute teaching a bit off and on, and then that summer after that, I was a counselor at a summer camp in Southampton, Long Island, and that was I was there for part of the summer. That's another long story about how I myself and the my friend who was the count senior counselor for the camp. We decided to leave for some other reasons, that things weren't happening the way we wanted. Anyway, when we left the college, the camp, and that was also at the camp, just another piece. This is all part of my memoir that I wrote called "Year of Living Deeply," and that year really starts off the summer, the time that I was at the summer camp with the moonwalk. And so that was an experience.
Wow.
It was an experience I had with the campers. One night, late at night, long after dinner, we all came back, and all the campers and counselors gathered around the tables in the dining hall around a really small black and white TV to watch the moonwalk. And of course, that was a hugely powerful experience for me, as well as many others, because it was my first view of our homeland without any boundaries anywhere. And that was really something that set me off on further along the quest that I had started, indirectly way back in my childhood. Then it was just a few weeks after the moonwalk that I happened to, by chance, to see a local newspaper with the headline of Clearwater sails into Port Jefferson. And that reminded me of my conversation with Pete Seeger the year before. And I knew that just seeing that, I knew that I had to drop what little I was doing at that moment and go find the sloop. And that's what I did. And I found Pete there, and we had a great conversation, reconnecting, and I offered to help out in any way. Told him about he knew, reminded him of my master's degree in folk culture and life story interviewing, and so he thought that would be another important component, along with getting people to clean up the Hudson River. He wanted everyone at the same time to come down to the river and know its history. So we decided that it would be a good project to see if we could get a grant to do some research on the life, you know, the life on the river in the days of the sloops. So he invited me to be on the maiden voyage of the Clearwater, that from South Street Seaport to Albany that summer, which I did, and I was the only non-singing crew member. Happened by chance because he had handpicked and invited about 9 or 10 of his favorite singing friends, from Don McLean to Ramblin' Jack Elliott to Reverend Kirkpatrick, just the whole bunch, Jimmy Collier, a bunch of others. And I happened to be the only non-singing crew member on that maiden voyage, which was a pretty amazing experience. Not only my
Just,
first, not only my
just
first sailing
incredible.
trip.
That alone is such an incredible thing to be with that icon, Pete, on that mission, which was so famous at the time, and surrounded by music and story and all the things that you were already interested in. That must have just been glory days for you at that time.
Oh, it definitely was. And I didn't have my footing really it took a few days for me to find my own footing on the sloop, fitting in. And actually the most helpful person for helping me to get that was the captain, who was not only a lifelong sailor, but also a singer. He really gave me some insights into the natural flow of things in the river and the fish, and this the whole environment that we were sailing through. So he was very helpful. And the interesting piece about his role and all that was when we got to Albany, it happened to be the weekend of Woodstock. And he mentioned to a few of us that I'm going to go over to Woodstock and see my old friend David Crosby. Anybody want to come with me? So a few of us. So he had. I mean, the backstory to that is he had also sailed with David Crosby many years. So a few of us went over from Albany to Woodstock. We arrived actually very early, the last morning, after all the traffic jams were cleared up and everything. But so that was another experience, being at Woodstock, and I could. That's all. This is all actually also part of my memoir of that year that I call Year of Living Deeply.
But that was just a summer. You had Moonwalk, you had Clearwater, you had Woodstock.
Right.
Oh my Lord, that is something else. Well, let's talk. So, what a foundation, and also I love this inspiration that you had to do this storytelling. So, it wasn't just you being interested in mythology, but almost creating mythology through the not mythology, but you know what I mean, a folklore of presence by capturing stories while people were still, you know, alive and able to tell their story. And that became a driving force for you.
It really did, yeah. And it came to fruition quite a few years later when I had my first academic appointment at the University of Southern Maine. As I mentioned, I created the Life Story Center to continue that work on. But it was there was a lot more to it for me actually getting to that point quite a few years later after I had finished my doctorate and everything, because that same winter, I mean, so just to move along from that incredible summer. After Woodstock, um, Pete helped me find a cabin in the woods, just a few yards from the Hudson River, which I went into and explored nature in depth there from the cabin. And that was in Beacon, New York, only a short ways up from the city. And so one day in the early winter, I decided I wanted to go into the city and just see what I could find, uh, mostly in terms of what I was studying on my own uh, around during that time, which was comparative mythology and comparative religion and everything. And so I went in to the city one day, and I was walking along 8th Street and stopped at the 8th Street bookshop, and a book in the window drew me in side, and I found the book and I started reading it, and then I glanced up at the bulletin board right in front of me. I saw a poster announcing a talk by Joseph Campbell, whose book I was reading that moment. And the talk was that evening, just a couple of blocks away at Cooper Union, and I had just enough time to walk over from 8th Street to Cooper Union, and I did that, and I sat down in the front row of the great hall of Cooper Union. It filled up around me, but it felt like when he started talking that it felt like I was the only one in the room, that he was talking directly to me, because he was describing the experience that I was having on an archetypal level, not the actual personal experiences I was having, but the archetypes that they represent. And so afterwards, I couldn't help but wanting to go up and just mention to him how important what he had to say was, and so I did that. And I also happened to mention that I would really like to be able to continue talking about these things sometime with you. And of course, that was way before he became really famous with his series with Bill Moyers. And so at that time, he was very willing to talk further with me, and he actually gave me his number and said get in touch. And so I did, and he became a second mentor for me during that time. And it was his, the context that he provided of how myths of all cultures and traditions follow the same pattern to not only, well, I mean, we've become familiar with it we've come to know it as the hero's journey, but it's so much more than that. It's even so much more than a journey of transformation. What we didn't, I didn't realize this at the time, of course, but um, so along with my interest in continuing my work with life stories, after meeting Joseph Campbell and him becoming a mentor, I also added on to that a kind of a parallel that I called personal myth making. So that was a way in which I could guide people in helping them to tell their life story as a personal myth, which which followed the pattern of and included the archetypes that Campbell had used in what he called the monomyth. So the call to adventure, the road of trials, and the return. We all live those in our own lives in so many ways and so many times. I mean, not just once, sometimes often, because it's a universal pattern of transformation. And what I came to realize later on, after doing many workshops on personal myth making, that same archetypal pattern is also a process for us to return to our lost wholeness. So my sense of the whole thing is that we're created as whole beings. We come into the world forgetting what we know. This is another uh, common legend in many traditions, and number of traditions. It's called the angel and the unborn soul, where where an angel comes to the soul in the womb and takes it on a journey to see what its life is going to be like on earth, and then brings it back to the womb. And the uh, the soul is born into this world, forgetting what the angel had showed it about its own life. So then our life becomes a process of remembering what we once knew. And in the context of the monomyth, that's a process of remembering our wholeness that we may have lost sight of. And so that's what I've been working a lot more on. More recently, I actually have a book that came out in 2022 called "A New Story of Wholeness," which presents that pattern, that ageless archetypal pattern, in the context of call to wholeness, path of purification, and return to wholeness. So I've been doing a lot of work not only with personal myth making, but trying to adapt and really make that pattern, which is universal, to also make it genderless, or not bound by gender, because our journey to wholeness is the same for all of us. There may be different individual circumstances and experiences, but the outcome is the same for all of us, whether we're women or men, and that is to return to our innate wholeness that we were created with.
So, I mean, there's so many things I'd like to ask you about, but your latest book is about unity and peace. And I want you to talk about that in a minute. But I think one thing that came to me, and you can agree or disagree with this, but I think it's what you're saying. Um, One thing that came to me a while back, years ago, when we were talking about unity consciousness a lot. And when we think about that, we're talking about unity consciousness between all of us, between you and me and everybody on the call and everybody in the world, right? That would be the unity consciousness. But it occurred to me that we can't really do that until we become unified within ourselves, until we find that wholeness within ourselves. And that's our number one job to do. And then we can approach this unity consciousness kind of thing. So I don't know if that plays into your thinking at all or not.
Yeah, definitely. And the individual unity or unitive consciousness is necessary for our collective unitive consciousness to be realized and fulfilled. And so as we live our life, I mean, this is the thing. Sometimes people talk about whether should I do this first, or wait on something else and do this first. For me, it's more of a matter of because they're so interconnected and interdependent. It's really a matter of doing both simultaneously, if you can imagine that, because that's what it is actually. When we do it, when we do that work, whether it's conscious or not, do it personally, that is ultimately contributing to the collective as well. So whether we know it or not, it is, and it has to be simultaneous, both at the same time. But it's interesting because different people may feel different differently about when they think they feel ready to do something more outwardly rather than inwardly. But for me, they're so interconnected and interdependent that we're really doing both at the same time, whether we know it or not. And of course, the other thing, for people that are like you, who are intuitive and everything, understand that whether we consciously know it or not, whatever we do and whatever we think personally, individually, has an impact on others. And this is something, this is actually bringing us right into something I wanted to mention about the new book, which has a little piece in the beginning that illustrates how this happens on both levels and in both ways at the same time. And that's I talk a little bit in the early part of the book about humanity being its own mycelial network.
Hmm.
And so, if you're familiar with mycelial networks, which I think is becoming more common knowledge these days,
Yeah.
it's basically, um, I mean, that concept comes from the underground network of roots that connect and sustain all the trees in the forest. We have no sense of that existing even when we're in a forest, because we don't have X-ray vision to see beneath the surface. But if we could see beneath the surface, we'd see how connected all of the trees are in the forest by that mycelial network of roots and other nourishing components. So I like to think of humanity, the human family, in the same way. But we're in the process of realizing that we don't know it yet. Um, we're just as humanity is just as organically connected and interdependent too. We just haven't acknowledged this yet. And so that's if I could say a little bit more about that. This really goes back to um, the news story that I was talking about a minute ago. But it really is important to, if it's not evident already, to contrast that to the old story that we've lived by far too long. And that one, the old story, is one in which we've been led to believe that we're all separate families, separate communities, separate nations, and to think that we're different, distinct, and disconnected. But there is a new story of wholeness emerging that's the exact opposite of that old story. And that's the story of humanity as a mycelial network. Humanity is in the early stages of discovering that it is its own mycelial network. So if we look a little further into that as a metaphor, and what that tells us is that if we understand and live by the laws of nature, the organic renewal of humanity will spread through the strength of its own unity and diversity.
Beautiful.
If we looked at, and I mean, when biologists or whoever examine closely the makeup of the mycelial network that connects trees underground, it's so clear to see how diverse all of those components are that are creating that connection. And so that's what enables mycelial networks to weave their wholeness with a pattern, persistence, and to move at their own pace, to be assured of their own outcome. And they're always building toward their own innate potential of a promised future. So, as we, as humanity, focus on building our own networks of care, cooperation, and sharing by safeguarding the common good, we'll recognize that this unity and diversity amongst ourselves is there too. And that is what, in that unity and diversity that I'm speaking of, requires diversity in unity. It's not uniformity at all. It's
Mhm.
diversity in unity. So we're all part of that kind of a mycelial network. It's interesting to think about the equivalent, um, what that would be in the social world that we live in. So we can, if we really knew and understood that all of humanity is a mycelial network, that would mean in the social world, that would mean renewing and recreating the entire infrastructure of social relationships upon a new foundation of universal harmony and unity. And so that's a process of growth and transformation that involves the full participation of the entire human family in building vibrant, resilient, inclusive, deeply connected, and harmonious communities right where we are. And so there's an incredible resemblance between the natural growth of mycelial networks in the forest and what we have the potential of achieving as a unified human family.
Wow, so beautifully said. So beautifully said in that metaphor. Well, first of all, it's so perfect because there you were as a little boy in the woods. I mean, your roots, so to speak, no pun intended, but your roots are showing up now here in this metaphor, which is so perfect because I think it's hard when we look at one another and our eyes perceive this separation. It's really kind of a lie because we can't see uh, what's really going on. We can't see that my field is really intertwined with yours, and that we are all connected. But it's hard for the mind to kind of hook into that. But I like your comparison to the mycelium because that's an interwoven network. I mean, it's right there, and it's easier to conceptualize, and it's easier to conceptualize when I, as one of these strands, make a decision or take an action or even think a thought. It's going to be communicated instantly, whether I like it or not, to everything else. That's it. It's a beautiful metaphor, very handy, very approachable. Um, I love that. And I have a question. This mythology, this personal mythology that has to do with, for those of us who are a little older, we can look back on our lives and say, okay, I can see where I was exploring. I can see which of the archetypes I was in at any given time. But I'm thinking for younger people, they might not see all of the phases yet. But in terms of reaching this unitive consciousness, how does the developing the personal mythology or understanding your personal story, how do those sync up? I feel like those things need to be connected for our listeners.
That's a really important one. And it's very appropriate that you mention young people because I've been thinking quite a bit about this actually lately, these days because of the condition of the world that young people are growing up in today, and it's our well, to put it briefly and quickly, they are missing the essence of life by being stuck on or almost attached to a device screen for more hours than they're not a day.
Yeah.
That's a practice in the in a way that is antithetical to most, if not all, spiritual practices, because a lot of from my own experience and what I've been drawn mostly to, as we have talked about, is learning from the laws of nature and the natural cycles of nature. And because that's where all of the archetypes come from, is the natural laws of nature. And young people today are missing that. So while they're spending all their time on their devices and everything else, um, thinking that they're creating a social, or I mean, obviously, it's called social media. They think they're creating their social world on a device that's held in their hands when the real world is, may not even be present at all for them much of the time. So the missing ingredient for me now for today's young people is what has been there for all of the heroes and heroines of all time, all cultures, all traditions. They all have a call to adventure. And what that call to adventure is about is leaving the familiar behind, letting go of what we think we need to hold on to, and reaching out into the unknown, not even concerned about what we think we might find there, but being open to. It's like, so the call to adventure begins with obviously a beginner's mind and an open heart. And without those two things, it's almost impossible to recognize a call to adventure when it comes. But that's the thing that's missing, because when people have that and recognize that they've been given a call to adventure, they recognize at the same time that, okay, it's time to leave certain things behind now. It's time to find something hard to imagine, even in a lot of cases, but something even greater than what I've known. And so that call to adventure is only fulfilled when we at the same time recognize the importance and the value of independently investigating reality on our own for ourselves,
Yes.
rather than letting anybody else tell us
Yes.
what they think reality is.
Yes.
So if we could somehow get that missing piece into the hands of today's young people, that would be a pretty big thing, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, really for anybody, but you're right. Yeah. I feel for the younger folks very much so. And I think this call to adventure, I hope that urge is still there. And I hope that the urge is loud enough that is an action that they'll take. It was such a different world when we were growing up, and we were left so much to our own devices as kids. You could plunk along next to your river, and you could walk over to the beach, and you could do whatever you wanted. And I did the same thing. We were adventuring all the time, almost every day. It was, in fact, don't come home, go and figure out something to do, outside. So it was kind of built in for us, you know. Um, I don't, and maybe earlier generations also, but it certainly has changed a lot. And there are a lot more indoor kids now, safe indoors, Well, I'm glad you've written your books, because they get into the hands of these young folks. Well, let's take a moment here, Bob, and see if we have some questions of anybody. Anybody would like to? Now you're going to have to, let's see. Raise your hand if you would, because I can't see anybody. Or just unmute yourself and speak up, because that's probably the easiest thing to do. But while we're waiting to see if anybody does that, Bob, in your new book, do you have sort of a handful of suggestions, aside from what you may have mentioned already, some format, some blueprint for people to do to try to become more unity conscious?
Yeah, that's what the book is intended to do, actually, and it does that in a broad way. One thing that I think of from what you were talking about is that the book does have what I would think of as three keys to a unitive vision. And of course, the the main the goal really, um, as you were saying, is to um, understand that there is such a thing as a unitive consciousness, what that is, and then strive to live our lives in a way that that um, brings about that unity within our own lives and around us and spreads out from there. So the book tries to present a broad picture of a unitive worldview that provides hope, optimism, and encouragement because we live in such a divided world. And the book really also provides a foundation and a framework for, as I referred to earlier, for building strong, vibrant, inclusive communities right where we are. But in order to do that, and in order to know why we should be doing that, the three keys that I identify that are necessary and that really facilitate a unitive vision are um, things that we can be aware of, things that are parts of a unitive worldview, or just knowing uh, three things really is what it comes down to. And I think these are really pretty straightforward and practical. But those three things that we need to know that will help us each along individually in our own lives and to be in more fruitful relationships with others. The first thing to know is that the natural order of the universe is wholeness, unity, and peace. If we know that, and there's a section in a couple of chapters actually in the book that go into detail about why and how the natural order of the universe is wholeness, unity, and peace. And then the second thing to know is that, I mean, what we already probably know is that we're not living in that state, in that natural state of wholeness, unity, and peace right now on this planet that we all share. We're not living that right now. So, and the second thing to know is that there are unitive principles that reflect and sustain this wholeness and peace. So then it becomes a process of learning about and what those unitive principles are. And I can mention a few of those in a minute. But then the third key to living a unitive vision would be just to know that there are already thousands of communities worldwide that are applying unitive principles to restore the world to wholeness and to build a culture of unity right where they are. So the groundwork of what will become this clearly evident mycelial network of humanity, that groundwork for that is already being laid in thousands of communities around the world. So those are what I consider the three keys to living into a unitive vision, which would include living with a unitive consciousness.
You know, Bob, this book is so important because it seems to me it's almost a handbook or a blueprint or that a person could take into their own communities and become a leader, even on their block, even, on their street. It doesn't have to be a huge thing. It can just start simply at home with your neighbors, and grow. I love that there are thousands of communities already doing this. I know in South Africa, there are geez, it just went out of my head. Uh, the community vision that they have there in South Africa that I'm just forgetting for the moment. But to know that this is already underway, it almost makes me think, I wonder if there's sort of that magic tipping point where it doesn't have to be the entire world that gets on board, but if there's enough, it will tip the mycelium into a new kind of balance or a new resonance. If enough of us do it, doesn't have to be everybody, but there's a majority, How do you feel about that?
Oh yeah, that definitely, and it's not necessarily even an actual majority. There are levels of what you're talking about, and the tipping point doesn't have to be necessarily the mid level. It can be other levels too. But thanks for recognizing that. I appreciate that, and you're right that in what you just said, because the book, I knew that the book needed something that could be used in a group or community basis and setting, and that's why I included in the book a pretty detailed study guide that goes through the highlights of each chapter with questions and answers for each chapter. And so the book is designed with a study guide to be used in groups and book clubs and communities of all kinds to bring about what the book is describing. What can be.
Fantastic. We almost don't have an excuse not to do it. Oh, Bob, you're such a gift. You're such a gift. And your deep thinking, your incredible, vast knowledge of worldwide mythology, religion. Um, it's really a rare treat to be able to talk with you from that breadth of understanding and the beautiful intention you have to bring that into fruition through a series of books, not just one, many books, so that we can all learn from your intelligence on this and your heart. It's a beautiful thing. And I really thank you for the generosity of what you've shared with the world. I'm really honored, to be able to chat with you like this. I'm so glad we met.
Me too. Thank you so much, Hope. I really appreciate this opportunity, and keep up the great work that you're doing as well.
Well, I'll do my best. I'll do my best. And I'm going to keep thinking about the mycelium. I love that. I'm going to maybe write about that this weekend on my weekly newsletter. But I want to say also, it's very similar to the infinity wave. This infinity wave is here to help us become unified within ourselves, to bathe ourselves in love and compassion so that we can become whole, so that we can accept ourselves. And then we use the infinity wave with one another. And now we connect through the wave, but it's the same as the mycelium. We're connecting and we're doing it on a frequency of love and compassion, very high frequency. So it's working on a different level towards the same goal.
Right. Definitely. Thanks for bringing the infinity wave in too. I was hoping that we could make that connection, because what I've been talking about and and your infinity wave, they're both about the interconnectedness and wholeness of all things, and how it's really, when you think about in terms of the infinity waves, it's impossible to separate any part of that out from the whole. Even you know, we just,
Exactly.
we just need to be able to turn things around a little bit so we can see it in the opposite way that the current majority sees things, because the opposite is even more true, that we are all part of the same wholeness rather than us all being part of the same separateness.
Right.
Just turn things inside out a little
Beautiful.
over there.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Bob, for taking the time to talk to us and inspire us. And as soon as I have this together in a replay, I'll be sharing it and I'll send it to you. I want to ask everybody, if you were inspired tonight or today for watching this, please like and subscribe for more infinite wisdom. There are just the most wonderful folks who come on to this podcast, and I think you will love every single one of them, as we have loved you, Bob. So good night for now, everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you for coming. Thank you for listening, and all blessings to everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.